Marcus kept his backpack tight against his shoulder, eyes fixed ahead. The air was crisp, leaves breaking loose from the tall oaks above, twirling down in lazy spirals. "You walking like you got somewhere important to be," the officer said, stepping forward. His voice was casual, but the weight in it, WASN, single quotes, T. Marcus stopped, glanced up just heading to class. The man's eyes swept over him, slow, funny. "You don't look like you belong here." A few students glanced over but quickly looked away. Marcus swallowed. "Been going here all year." The officer tilted his head, half smiling. "That right? Got some ID?" Marcus hesitated, his hand hovering near his pocket. He could feel the stares, the sound of footsteps slowing as people passed. "You know," the officer continued, "when folks take too long to answer, I start wondering what they're hiding." Marcus handed over his card. The officer took his time, flipping it in his hand like it was something fragile. "You live over on Grant Street?" "Yes, sir. That's a long walk to a school like this." The tone was almost friendly, but Marcus caught the thread beneath it. From across the lot, "Ms. Daniels," his history teacher, called out. "Marcus, you're gonna be late." The officer's smile thinned. "Guess you're free to go, then." Marcus took the card, fingers brushing against the man's cold knuckles. He turned without another word. Behind him, the officer leaned back against the post, eyes still on him, as if letting him walk was a favor. The wind caught another handful of leaves, scattering them across the pavement. Marcus didn't look back. Marcus had just stepped off the stage, medals still cold against his chest, when Officer Keller's shadow stretched across the grass. "Well, look who's our little hero," Keller said, his voice carrying far beyond the front row. He raised his hand, snapping it into a salute so exaggerated it looked more like a mockery than honor. The parents laughed. Some thought it was harmless fun. Marcus knew better. "Sir," Marcus replied quietly, the single word catching in his throat. "Come on, give the crowd a wave," Keller said, turning Marcus toward the bleachers. "Show him that smile." Marcus didn't smile. "I think I'll pass." Keller's grin thinned. "That's not very respectful, son." "I'm not your son," Marcus said, voice even. The laughter in the crowd faltered. A couple of parents exchanged looks, unsure if this was still part of the show. Keller stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not enough to hide the edge. "You better watch that tone." Marcus met his eyes. "You better watch yours." A beat of silence. The medal around Marcus's neck felt heavier now, not like an honor but a chain. Keller straightened, adjusting his belt. "Enjoy your big moment," he said, but his voice had lost the smug ease it carried a minute ago. Marcus didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away. The laughter behind him replaced by an uneasy murmur. In that short distance something had shifted. Keller stayed rooted to the spot, watching the boy disappear into the crowd. And for the first time that afternoon, the officer's smile didn't return. Her hands were still shaking from the last exchange when his laugh broke the air. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to slice through the quiet, hanging there like smoke that refused to clear. "You really think you're important enough to make this a thing?" he said, voice casual, almost bored. She looked at him, steady now. "I think I'm important enough not to be laughed at in front of strangers." A few people shifted, glancing between them. Someone coughed. He smirked, leaning back against the hood of his car. "Relax, it's a joke. Everyone's too sensitive these days." Her jaw tightened. A joke is funny to both people. He shrugged, but the movement felt heavier than before. "You could just walk away, you know. No one's stopping you." She didn't move. The stillness between them thickened, pulling at the space around their feet. "You don't get to tell me where I stand," she said quietly. A man near the crosswalk dropped his gaze, pretending to check his phone. His smirk faltered. "You're making this bigger than it is." "No," she replied, voice low, calm. "You made it big when you thought it was small enough to hide in laughter." For a second, the air shifted. His eyes darted to the people behind her, the ones not smiling anymore. "Fine," he muttered, pushing off the car, his tone flatter, his shoulders tighter. "Whatever." She stayed still, watching him walk away, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the hum of traffic. Somewhere behind her, a woman let out a slow breath, and the silence settled again, heavier this time, but hers to hold. Keller leaned back in his chair, the smirk lingering. "Bet she's embarrassed. Daddy waiting in military cosplay." His voice carried just enough for the nearby nurses to hear, their half-suppressed chuckles adding weight to the sting. Marcus didn't flinch. "You done?" His tone was low, steady, the kind that didn't need volume to be dangerous. Keller tilted his head, pretending confusion. "Just saying, it's a hospital, not a parade." Might be wrong place for that kind of statement. From the corner of her seat, little Ava's legs swung nervously. She looked between them, not fully understanding the words, but sensing their edge. Marcus's eyes stayed locked on Keller. You wouldn't say that if you knew the statement. Keller's grin faltered, just a flicker, before he forced it back. Relax, man. It's a joke. Marcus took a step closer, closing the space between them. The last time I wore this uniform, I was carrying a soldier younger than you out of a burning convoy. He didn't make it. The laughter in the room thinned into silence. Keller's gaze darted toward the nurses, now busying themselves with paperwork. You think you're clever, Marcus continued quietly, but all you did was tell my daughter her father's service is a punchline. Keller swallowed. I didn't. You did. Marcus cut in.com, but cutting.ava reached for her father's hand. Marcus took it without looking away from Keller. Wrong place, you said. No. Wrong man. Keller nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then stepped back. Marcus turned to leave, the quiet following him heavier than the insult that started it. Ava's grip tightened, and in that small hand he felt something close to victory. Marcus's hands stayed loose at his sides, though every muscle in him knew how to fight. The drizzle clung to his lashes. Across from him, the man's smirk faltered, just slightly. You done? Marcus asked, voiced even. The man laughed under his breath. Guess you think you're better than the rest of us, standing there all composed. Marcus didn't move. No, I just don't think you're worth my anger. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain dripping off the awning. Someone behind them shifted uncomfortably. You think this is strength? The man pressed. I think breaking in front of you would be giving you what you want, Marcus said. His words were quiet, but they carried, and I don't hand out gifts. A faint tightening crossed the man's jaw. He glanced at the others, as if looking for support that didn't come. Narration settled in Marcus's thoughts, the years of walking away, of biting his tongue, of holding a line no one else could see. He'd learned that breathing through humiliation hurt less than letting it own him. The man tried again, weaker this time. Maybe you just don't have it in you. Marcus exhaled slowly. Or maybe I've got more than you'll ever understand. But words landed heavier than a shout. A woman in the small crowd looked down, her arms crossing over her chest. The man shifted back, muttering something under his breath. The space between them grew. Marcus didn't follow. He only stepped once to the side, letting the rain hit him full, his eyes still steady, not broken, not even bent. And that, more than anything, ended it. The silence clung to the hallway. Mr. Harris didn't move at first, his eyes narrowing as if to gauge whether she'd really said it. You think you can talk to me like that? His voice was low, but his jaw worked hard. I just did, Lena replied, her tone steady. From down the corridor, a nurse glanced up, then quickly busied herself with paperwork. The air felt heavier now, as if everyone knew something had shifted. You're out of line, he muttered. You've had your laugh, now go back to your post. She didn't blink, didn't lean forward, just enough to make it clear she was done entertaining him. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, a flicker, not fear, but the realization that someone had just closed a door in his face. You think I won't report this? His hands tightened around his clipboard. Do what you need to do. Her voice was flat, almost bored. I'll be right here. He stared at her for a beat too long, and for the first time, there was no smirk, no sideways comment. Somewhere behind them, a monitor beeped steadily. Finally, he turned on his heel. His footsteps were quick at first, then slowed, like he was trying not to look like he was retreating. Lena exhaled slowly, keeping her expression neutral. Inside, the rush of adrenaline fought with a strange calm. At the nurse's station. Heads were down, but she could feel eyes on her, not curious. Exactly, watching, measuring. She smoothed the sleeve of her uniform, the movement small but grounding. The weight of the moment settled in. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. Something had changed, and he knew it. Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. Keller leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth twisting upward like he'd already won. So Keller's voice dripped with condescension. What's your play here? File a complaint. Make a scene. Marcus let the silence stretch. The hum of the old ceiling fan filled the space between them. Keller's smirk deepened. You think standing here means something, Keller went on. But I've been doing this job long enough to know people like you don't get far. Marcus tilted his head slightly. People like me. Keller's shrug was casual, but his tone wasn't. You know exactly what I mean. The air between them thickened. Marcus's jaw tightened. but his voice stayed. Even you've mistaken this for a conversation where you have the upper hand. Keller chuckled. Oh, I'm pretty sure I do. Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk, his gaze locked. That badge on your chest. His tone sharpened just enough. It's worth something until it isn't. Keller blinked, the smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second. I've seen men like you walk into rooms thinking they can talk down to anyone, Marcus continued, each word deliberate, and I've seen them walk out, quieter. Keller's laugh, this time, was forced. Is that supposed to scare me? Marcus straightened, stepping back slowly. No. But the next time we speak, you'll understand. Something in Keller's expression shifted, not fear, not yet, but a flicker of uncertainty. Marcus turned toward the door, his footsteps measured. Keller stayed seated, but the room didn't feel like his anymore. By the time the door closed, Keller was still staring at it. The echo of Marcus's calm voice lodged somewhere he couldn't quite shake. The hallway was thinning out, voices softening as lockers slammed shut. Do you think that's over? Maya's voice barely broke the hum, her eyes still locked on the space where Keller had stood minutes ago. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Not every fight is won loud, he murmured. She swallowed hard, glancing at the families drifting toward the exit. Feels like we just let it slide. No, he said, watching Keller disappear around a corner, his gait stiff. We just let it sink in. Maya looked down, toe tracing the tiles crack. She hated the stillness, the waiting, yet she caught the flicker in Keller's posture earlier, the tiny break when he couldn't meet her father's eyes. The school doors opened, letting in a burst of cold air. Parents sipped coats, kids laughed about homework. Everything looked normal, but her chest felt heavy. You ever wonder, Maya said quietly, if silence is just giving them permission? Her father's lips tightened. Sometimes, but sometimes, it's letting them hear their own echo. For a moment, the world outside felt distant, muffled under the weight of words not said. Across the lot, Keller stopped by his car, fumbling with his keys. He glanced back once, as if checking whether someone was watching. He found Maya's gaze and froze. She didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. And for the first time all afternoon, Keller looked smaller. Her father nodded toward the car. That's the start. The wind cut through her jacket, but Maya stood still, the cold digging into her bones. She realized the real sting wasn't in what had been said, it was in what lingered after. Silence, she thought, could bruise deeper than shouting, and Keller had just felt it. By the time Maya reached her room, her phone was buzzing. Check your messages. Jamal's voice came through before she could speak. She tapped the link. The screen lit up with shaky footage, Keller's smirk, the pause, her father's steady voice, laughter somewhere off camera, then the insults. Short, ugly. Her stomach tightened. Who? It's everywhere. Jamal cut in. Private, groups, chats, people sharing without saying much, just watching. She sat on the bed, phone in hand. They'll twist it, maybe, he said, or maybe they'll just let it burn. Maya scrolled the comments, emojis, clipped phrases. Did you see? This town, not surprised? No one called it out directly, but she could feel it. The slow ignition. Her father knocked on the door. You've seen it. She nodded, holding the phone out. He glanced at it once, then set it face down on the desk. Don't watch it again, he said quietly. But no, let them watch. Let them talk where we can't hear. The stillness between them was heavier than the video itself. Outside, a car passed, muffler rattling. She wanted to ask if he was angry, scared, relieved, but his expression gave nothing away. They think it's just a clip, he finally said. They don't know it's a record. Maya looked at the phone, now dark on the desk. The faces on the screen were no longer just Keller's or hers. They were in other pockets, on other lips. Jamal texted again. This is how things start. She typed back without sending, or end. The video would fade from timelines one day, but not from memory. Pixels don't forget, and neither would she. The kitchen smelled faintly of garlic and tomato, steam curling from the pot as Marcus stirred. Jasmine's voice carried from the table, bright with excitement. And if we add vinegar to the baking soda, it's gonna explode like a real volcano, she said, her small hands shaping mountains in the air. Marcus nodded, eyes on the sauce. Just make sure it's on the porch, not the carpet. Her laugh was light, untarnished. The sound washed over him like music, pulling him from the weight, pressing at the back of his mind. Outside, cars passed, one horn blaring too long. Somewhere a phone buzzed. He ignored it. Jasmine tilted her head. Dad, why is everybody talking about that lady at the bank? He set the spoon down, wiping his hands slowly. People talk, Jazz. Doesn't mean we have to listen. But you heard. right? Her voice lowered, curious. Marcus met her eye steady, but not sharp. I heard enough to know it's not worth bringing to our dinner table. She frowned, then nodded, returning to her sketch of the volcano. The sauce bubbled. He stirred again, calm. That was the choice. From the counter, his phone lit up message after message, his name tagged in a dozen posts. The world outside was loud, hungry for reaction. He reached for the ladle instead. How about after dinner, we mix the vinegar and baking soda? See how big we can make it blow. Her grin was immediate, biggest ever. He smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes, and let the noise outside fade into background hum. Sometimes holding on to quiet was the loudest thing a man could do. The locker door clanged shut, echoing down the tiled row. Keller sat on the bench, boots untied, while two officers huddled over a phone. Schoolyard sheriff, one said, stifling a laugh. The other chimed in, Mr. G.I. Joe, keeping the streets safe from, what was it, a withdrawal slip. Their laughter bounced off the walls, low but sharp. Keller forced a smirk, the kind that hid more than it showed. "You got too much time," he muttered, reaching for his laces. "Come on, man, it's a compliment," the taller one said, nudging him. "No one else could have kept a straight face like you did." The phone screen flashed again. The clip, jerky, pixelated, played on loop. Keller's voice, clear as day. "Ma'am, you're making a scene." "Funny how a phone catches everything," another officer said from across the room, his tone a little too even. Keller's hand stilled mid. He looked up, meeting the man's eyes just long enough to register the weight in them, not mockery, something quieter. The laughter faded slightly, replaced by murmurs. Someone opened a locker, the metallic creak filling the pause. "You gonna let it bother you?" the tall one asked, half grinning. Keller shrugged. "Doesn't bother me." It wasn't true. He could feel the heat behind his ears, the pulse in his jaw. Out there, people were talking. In here, they were laughing. And somehow, both felt the same. As he stood to leave, one voice followed him, lighter, almost friendly. "Hey Keller, good work out there." He didn't answer, just tightened his boots and walked out, leaving the sound of their chuckles behind. Mockery or praise, it didn't matter. Either way, it stuck to the skin. "Dad, why don't you ever put those on the wall?" Emily's voice was small, muffled by the cold morning air as they crossed the street. He glanced down at her, tightening his grip on her hand. "Because they're not for looking at," he said. "They're pretty." She pressed, her head tilting. "They're heavy," he murmured. She frowned, not understanding. The medals had been tucked away since she was born. Not even her mother had seen them more than once. At the school gates, another father stood laughing with a group of men, his blazer dotted with shining pins. The man caught sight of him, and his smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You served?" the man asked, stepping forward. "Yes," he said simply. "Where?" "Places you wouldn't want your son to go," he replied. His voice was steady, but inside, the weight of courtroom testimonies and cold stares pressed hard against his chest. Emily squeezed his hand. "Daddy, go on in, he said, brushing her cheek. She hesitated before running to join. Her friends, the man with the pins, lingered. "You know, people should see those medals. Show some pride." He looked at him, the corners of his mouth tightening. "Pride's not the same as proof." The man blinked, unsure how to respond. As he turned to leave, the laughter from the group behind them had softened, a quiet curiosity replacing it. His steps were unhurried, but inside, he felt the shift, not in them, but in himself. Some honors, he thought, are best kept where they can't be used as weapons. And with that, the box in the drawer stayed closed. Marcus sat by the window, the sterile light of the hospital seeping into his skin like frost. Across from him, Dr. Harrington stood, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. "You won," the doctor said, voice flat. Marcus didn't look up. "That's what they're calling it." A long pause. Machines hummed somewhere down the hall. "Changed the protocols," Harrington went on, as if listing repairs to a broken machine. "No patient will." "No patient like her," Marcus cut in. His tone wasn't loud, but it landed like a weight on the table between them. Harrington shifted, eyes flicking toward the door. It wasn't intentional. Marcus's gaze finally rose, locking him. Their negligence doesn't need intention. It just needs someone to decide they can wait a little longer for her. For a moment, the room held its breath. Harrington's jaw worked, words forming and dying before leaving his mouth. "You think I don't carry it?" he said quietly. "I think you'll carry it differently," Marcus replied. "You'll still go home and hang your coat on the same hook. I go home and she's not there." The silence swelled, sharp as glass. Harrington's eyes dropped, his composure fraying. I'm sorry, he said at last, but it sounded smaller than it should. Marcus stood, slipping on his jacket. You're not saying it to me. You're saying it so you can breathe easier tonight. He walked past him, slow, deliberate. Harrington didn't turn at the doorway. Marcus stopped, voice low. Make sure no one else has to stand where I am. Then he left. The doctor stayed frozen, the hum of the machines now impossibly loud. Do you want me to now write the next subheading, continuing this emotional thread? That way the momentum doesn't break. His office smelled faintly of old paper and black coffee. The blinds were half drawn, letting in strips of August sunlight. He didn't look up when the door opened. You're the district attorney, she asked, her voice low, almost accusing. He capped his pen, finally meeting her eyes. Yes, but I don't run for photographs. A pause lingered between them. She stayed standing, arms crossed. I expected, she began. Someone louder. His tone was dry, but not unkind. Someone who shakes hands in grocery stores. Her lips tightened. Someone who'd at least show their face when injustice walks in. He leaned back, studying her. I do, just not in the way people like to see. She shifted, her weight moving from one foot to the other. Then why call me here? Because, he said, voice softening, the people who wronged you think no one's watching. Silence again. He let it sit, heavy. You're not going to grandstand? She asked. No. He slid a file toward her. But I am going to make them wish they'd never met you. She stared at the folder, hesitant. What's in there? Evidence, he said simply, enough to turn a whisper into a verdict. Her breath caught. She looked at him for the first time as if seeing something solid. He didn't smile. Power works best, he murmured, when no one knows you're holding it. Her fingers brushed the file. She didn't thank him, just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that said more than gratitude ever could. Outside, the courthouse clock struck the hour, its chime cutting through the still air. Neither of them moved. The fluorescent light above hummed faintly. Mariah sat at the corner of the desk, the file open between her and Detective Harris. Pages curled slightly at the edges, each one stamped and signed, neat enough to hide the rot inside. Harris kept his eyes on the folder, but his jaw tightened. You've been collecting these? He asked, voice low. I didn't collect them, Mariah said, her hand resting on the stack. They've been sitting in that cabinet for years. I just looked. He flipped a page, a citation for a cracked taillight that didn't exist, a routine check that led to nothing. Names repeating, same neighborhoods, same officers. He stopped, exhaling hard. It's not enough, not for court. Her gaze didn't move. It's enough to see the pattern. Harris leaned back, rubbing his temple. The silence stretched, heavy as the air in the cramped office. You know what happens if I push this, he said finally. They close ranks. They'll make me regret it. They already made people regret being black in their own cars. Mariah replied, her voice steady. He looked at her then, not as an officer, but as a man cornered between his badge and his conscience. I can't win this fight. You don't have to win, she said. You just have to stop looking away. The sound of the file closing was louder than it should have been. Harris stood slowly, his hand lingering on the cover. For a moment he seemed smaller, as if the uniform weighed more than he could carry. When he walked out, Mariah stayed seated, fingers still on the papers. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. No one picked up. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug, the steam curling upward between them. The room smells faintly of burnt toast, but neither of them eats. I'm not sure you understand what you're asking, she says quietly, eyes fixed on the chipped table edge. The old man leans back, his gaze heavy. I'm asking you to do what no one else has had the guts to. Brad Keller's been protected for too long. Her throat feels dry. Protected by who? He huffs a humorless laugh. By everyone who benefits from keeping him right where he is. His voice falters for a moment. I've seen what he's done. You think folks just don't remember? No, they remember. They're scared. Silence stretches between them, pressing against her ribs. She doesn't want to ask, but the words slide out anyway. And why now? The officer's eyes drop. To the table. Because I can't stand by anymore. And because he stops, jaw tightening. You're not afraid of him, are you? She swallows, forcing her voice steady. Fear's not the problem. What is? His tone sharpens. Her gaze finally meets his. The problem is, once I start, I can't stop. And when Keller falls, he won't go alone. For the first time, the old man looks uncertain. The air shifts. The faint hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud. I'm not here for half measures, he says, but softer now. She nods, a slow, measured motion. Then neither am I. The retired officer exhales, almost relieved. Outside a dog barks. breaking the stillness but inside. The decision has already settled. The mug between her hands cools, untouched. The newsroom buzz had dulled to a low hum by the time Rachel's eyes froze on the paused video. Keller's voice, sharp, dismissive, replayed in her head. She dragged the cursor back, watched again, and something clicked. Wait, she whispered, leaning closer. Her colleague glanced over what she didn't answer. Instead, Rachel opened a new tab, fingers flying over the keyboard. A name search, then another, cross-referencing corporate filings, old press releases, donation lists. Her coffee went cold. Rachel, the colleague pressed. She shook her head, half smiling. Give me a second. Her heart thumped when the final record popped up. Same name, same face, same man. Keller had humiliated. She breathed. You found something. Rachel looked at him, eyes sharp. He's the CEO, the majority shareholder. Keller wasn't yelling at just anyone. She was yelling at the guy who literally owns the company. The words hung in the air, pulling the room's attention. A couple of nearby reporters turned in their chairs. You sure? She tapped the screen. I checked twice. This is bulletproof. Silence, heavy and charged. Rachel leaned back, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. This isn't just a workplace incident. This is career-ending, someone muttered. If it's true, Keller's finished. Rachel didn't look away from the screen. She could already see the headline forming in her mind. Asterisk in that moment. The hum of the newsroom shifted. People weren't just curious anymore, they were hungry. And Keller, somewhere in the city, had no idea the walls were already closing in. Do you want me to now immediately continue into the next subheading? So, the momentum carries without a pause. That way the tension stays seamless. Her fingers shook when she opened the manila envelope. No name, no return address. Just a cheap flash drive. Taped 2 photocopied misconduct reports so faded they looked older than the coffee stains on the desk. Who dropped this? He asked, voice low. The young clerk at the counter swallowed. It was in the mail bin, no signature. Inside she already knew what it meant. Someone had decided to speak without stepping into the light. That kind of courage, or fear, always carried a price. Asterisk. She plugged the drive into the laptop, ignoring the hollow hum in her ears. The video came up, grainy body cam footage that had never made it to the official files. A woman's voice, shaking, begging for help. Then silence, broken by the kind of laughter that didn't belong anywhere near a hospital hallway. Asterisk. Anywhere near a hospital hallway. Turn it off, said a voice from behind her. She hadn't heard him walk in. She didn't move. You knew about this. His jaw flexed. You don't understand. I understand enough. Her voice was quieter now, but every word cut. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. If you keep digging, you'll lose more than your job. She closed the laptop gently, as though the act itself was a line she refused to cross loudly. Then you should have thought about that before someone sent me this. They stood there. For a moment, the air between them dense with something unsaid. Finally, he spoke, almost to himself. It wasn't supposed to get out. She met his eyes. Steady. Things like this always do. Asterisk. Outside the office, the building hummed like nothing had happened. Inside, the slow-moving bullet had found its first target. The jukebox played something soft, but Keller's voice cut right through it. I told him straight. He chuckled, lifting his glass. You can't just walk in here thinking you're someone. Asterisk. 2 men at the bar laughed politely, glancing at each other. Keller leaned forward, beer breath thick in the air. Kid thought the uniform meant something. Didn't even make it too basic yet. From a booth in the corner, the air shifted. A young woman, her jacket still damp from the rain outside, turned her head slightly. She didn't interrupt, just listened. Keller slapped the counter. You should have seen his face. Thought he could talk back. Not on my watch. The bartender's rag slowed over the counter. You ever think maybe you went too far? He asked quietly. Keller scoffed. Too far. Kid needs to learn. World's not gonna coddle him. The young woman rose, her footsteps deliberate. She stopped beside Keller, her voice even. That kid you're talking about, he's my brother. Silence fell sharper than the clink of a glass. Keller turned, eyes narrowing. Your brother, yeah, she said. And you didn't show him his place, you showed him yours. The bartender's hand froze mid-wipe. One of the men at the bar shifted uncomfortably. Keller smirked, though the edges trembled. Look, lady, it was just a beer story, she cut in. Or the part where you humiliated him in front of a crowd. Keller opened his mouth, but no sound came. The jukebox played on. She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked out, leaving the air heavier than before. Keller took another drink, but it didn't go down as easy. The door clicked shut behind Keller. a few heads turning but quickly returning to their notes. Marcus didn't look up right away. He let Keller see him there, seated at the center, calm, pen in hand. "You're late," Marcus said, voice even. Keller smirked, sliding into a chair. "Traffic. Traffic doesn't usually smell like bourbon," someone muttered from the far end. Laughter didn't follow, just the rustle of papers. Keller's jaw tightened. "So, this is your big moment." Marcus finally met his eyes. "It's not about moments, it's about decisions." Silence spread. Keller tapped his pen against the table. "You think one seat changes anything?" "It's not the seat," Marcus replied quietly. "It's who's willing to sit in it and not look away." Keller's gaze flicked to the others. A few avoided his eyes. "You planning to lecture me in front of? I'm not here for you," Marcus interrupted, his tone flat but cutting. "I'm here for the kids, you forgot." Something in Keller's smirk faltered. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "And what about the ones who don't deserve it? The troublemakers?" Marcus didn't blink. "Every kid deserves it. Even the ones who remind you of yourself." The words hung in the air like smoke. Keller's mouth opened but no sound came. A clock ticked loud in the quiet. Papers shifted. Someone coughed. Marcus closed his folder slowly. "We'll start the agenda." Keller didn't move for a beat. His swagger had drained, leaving him still, eyes on the table. The meeting rolled forward. But the balance in the room had shifted, and everyone felt it. The low hum of the cabin fades under the weight of the silence. Keller's smirk hangs, for half a second longer than it should, then falters. "You're in first class." His voice cracks in the middle. The man doesn't answer right away. He leans back, eyes steady, not aggressive, just unshakably certain. "Now I'm here because I own this conversation." Keller swallows. "Look, I didn't mean you did." The words are calm, but they land like a punch. "And you meant it every other time you've said something like that." The flight attendant shifts uneasily, eyes darting between them. Keller forces a chuckle, but it's hollow. "All right, maybe I was out of line. Just a joke." "Jokes," the man says, leaning forward slightly, "are funny to everyone in the room. You were the only one laughing." Keller glances at the passengers nearby, some pretending not to listen, others staring openly. The heat in his face grows. "You're making this bigger than it is," Keller mutters. "No," the man replies softly. "You just never had anyone look you in the eye while you did it." For the first time, Keller's gaze drops to the floor. His hand twitches toward his drink but doesn't make it. The man sits back, voice quiet but cutting through the air. "Consider this the last time you speak to someone like they're beneath you, because the next person might not be as patient." Keller nods once, the motion small, almost involuntary. The man turns away. Conversation over, not with a shout, not with a threat, but with a silence that swallows the last of Keller's grin. The flight feels longer now, and Keller has nothing to say. The microphones hum faintly, catching every breath. Keller's jaw tightens, but his eyes don't quite meet Marcus's. "You preside." His voice is thin, stripped of its usual swagger. Marcus doesn't blink. "Over this hearing, over what happens next." Keller exhales through his nose, a sharp, nervous sound. "You think sitting there changes who you are to me?" "No," Marcus says, voice even. "It changes who I am to everyone else." A reporter scribbles. Camera shutters clicked like distant rain. Keller glances toward the board members, searching for a sympathetic face. None return his look. "You've got the floor," Keller mutters, crossing his arms. "Say what you came to say." "I don't need to say it," Marcus replies. "It's already been said by years of the way you've treated people like me." The silence stretches. Keller shifts his weight. The lights make his skin damp, his collar itch. "You're making me the villain," Keller says finally. Marcus leans forward just enough. "I'm not making you anything. I'm letting you stand in the light you've built for yourself." A low murmur rolls through the room. Keller's fingers tap against the table, uneven, restless. "You can't just—" "I can," Marcus interrupts, calm as stone, "because now, the record will remember your words as clearly as I do." Keller's mouth opens, then closes. He swallows, Adam's apple jerking. The air feels thick enough to choke on. Marcus sits back, gaze steady. "We'll proceed." The gavel's tap is soft, but final. The silence after is worse than any shout. It's the kind that leaves Keller smaller in his chair, staring at nothing. As the room breathes without him, the screen flickers. A pause. In the footage holding Keller's smirk longer than anyone wants to see it. "That's you, isn't it?" The investigator asks, eyes steady. Keller clears his throat. "Looks like it." Asterisk. "No." The father in the witness chair says quietly, "It is." His hands are clasped tight, knuckles pale. You pulled me over for a taillight that wasn't broken, my son, he cried all the way home. Keller shifts in his seat. I was doing my job. That your job? The father's voice wavers but doesn't rise, making a boy believe his dad might not come back. A ripple of unease moves through the room. Someone coughs. The camera shutters start again. Internal Affairs continues reading. Complaint dated April 12th. Unlawful search. Verbal intimidation. The list keeps going, each entry short but sharp. Keller's responses shrink. Don't recall. Not exactly, if you say so. The words land like pebbles, too small to build any defense. Marcus sits at the head of the table, silent. His gaze never leaves Keller, but he doesn't push. The silence is heavier than any question. Finally, the father stands. You can't take back what you did, he says, looking at Keller, then at Marcus. But maybe you can stop it from happening to someone else. Keller's jaw works, but nothing comes out. The footage plays again. The smirk still there, stubborn, unchanged. Only now, under the lights and the eyes of the room, it looks like something else, nervous, almost desperate. The uniform feels thinner on him, its armor gone. The investigator clicks the remote. The screen goes black. The quiet that follows makes Keller drop his gaze to the table, as if it might offer a way out. It doesn't. You mistook service for weakness, Marcus says, his voice steady but low enough that the room leans in. That was your last mistake. No one moves. Even the clicking cameras hesitate, as if unsure whether to break the moment. Keller's eyes stay down. He doesn't ask for another chance, doesn't even try to explain. The fight in him is gone, replaced by something heavier. The board finds your actions in violation of duty and law, the lead investigator states. Effective immediately. Termination. Criminal review pending. A rustle moves through the crowd. The reporters are already jotting headlines in their notebooks. The father from earlier doesn't smile, doesn't nod, he just stares, as if making sure the words are real. Keller swallows, still looking at the floor. Marcus's gaze lingers on him, not with triumph, but with the kind of calm that comes after years of being told to wait, to stay quiet, to prove it the right way. Outside the chamber, voices start to swell. Whispers first, then louder. A chant takes shape somewhere beyond the double doors. A young officer near the back glances at Marcus, then at Keller. His jaw is tight. Maybe he's realizing the badge isn't the shield he thought it was. Keller finally lifts his head, not to Marcus, but to the row of cameras. For a second he looks like he might speak. He doesn't. Marcus gathers his papers, slow and deliberate. The noise from outside pushes through the walls. When the gavel finally drops, it's almost unnecessary. The real verdict had already landed. In the silence between Marcus's words, Keller stands, but the weight follows him out. The uniform hangs loose now, its armor gone, the illusion stripped bare. The badge sits in the center of the desk, catching the light just enough to remind Keller what it used to mean. Looks smaller now. The principal says quietly, not looking up from the paperwork. Keller doesn't answer. He watches the TV in the corner, headline after headline crawling across the screen, each one sharper than the last. His name is no longer followed by officer, just former. You could say something, the principal offers, voice flat. To who? Keller finally murmurs. Nobody's picking up. The phone on the desk is dark, untouched. No messages, no missed calls, not even from the ones who swore they'd stand by him. You built a career on people thinking you had their back, the principal says. Now they know you didn't. Keller's jaw tightens. You don't know I know enough. The principal cuts in. The silence after is heavier than the words. On the TV, a news clip rolls. Marcus outside the courthouse, his voice calm, telling the press, this isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. The crowd behind him cheers. Keller leans back, his chair creaking. He's not even angry. That's what makes it worse, the principal replies. Keller looks at the badge again. It used to feel like armor. Now it's just metal and numbers, cold and weightless. The principal slides an envelope across the desk. You'll need this for the review. Keller doesn't open it. He stares at the badge a moment longer, then pushes it gently toward principal. The sound it makes, that small, final scrape, feels louder than anything else in the room. The heat clings to the pavement, making every step heavier. Marcus crosses the lot without hurrying, his eyes fixed ahead. He hears them before he sees them. Low voices, words tucked behind cupped hands. That's him, someone murmurs. Another voice. I didn't know it was that bad. A man by the fence takes a step toward him. Marcus, you don't have to finish, Marcus says, not breaking stride. The man nods, ashamed, and fades back into the line of parents. A mother near the gate whispers. He held his ground. Her friend says nothing, just follows Marcus with her eyes. Then he sees her, his daughter, breaking free from the cluster of kids. She runs full tilt, hair wild in the wind, and collides into his chest. You came, she breathes. Always, he answers, his voice steady but low. She leans back, looking up at him. Mum would be proud. For a moment he can't speak. The lot, the whispers, the stares, none of it exists except her small hand gripping his shirt. I hope so, he says finally. Around them, the quiet grows heavier. Even the usual car door slamming seem to wait. Marcus shifts her backpack onto his shoulder. You ready to go? He asks. She nods. Can we walk, not drive? He smiles faintly. Yeah, we can walk. As they turn toward the street, a few parents watch with something new in their faces, not pity, not just curiosity, something closer to respect. Marcus doesn't look back. His daughter's hand stays in his, warm and sure. The lot stays still until they're gone. The diner smells. The same burnt coffee, grease on the air, but the sound is different. No clinking laughter, no voices calling his name. Keller sits in the corner booth, back to the wall. A waitress passes by without stopping. He raises a hand, half-hearted. She pretends not to notice. From the counter, two men in work shirts glance. His way, one says something under his breath. The other shakes his head. Keller stares into his mug. The coffee's cold. Didn't think you'd still be around, a voice says. He looks up. It's Tom, the same Tom who once stood beside him, at town meetings, clapping the loudest. Got nowhere else, Keller replies. Tom nods slowly, eyes darting to the door. People talk hard to be near it. I know. Keller's voice is low, almost swallowed by the hum of the fridge. Silence stretches. Tom shifts, uncomfortable. You were good at speaking. You know, people listened. They listened to what they wanted to hear, Keller says. Tom hesitates. And now, Keller glances out the window. The street is empty, sun bleaching the pavement. Now they hear what they can't unhear. Tom starts to speak, then stops. He leaves without finishing. The bell above the door giving a single, sharp ring. Keller stays, watching the shadows from the blinds crawl across the table. In the past, this was when someone would come over, ask his opinion, invite him to a meeting. Now, no one moves. The room feels wider, the distance between him and the rest of the world growing inch by inch. He takes one last sip of the cold coffee, sets the cup down, and lets the silence swallow what's left. Marcus sits at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the wood worn smooth by years of family meals. Lydia's photograph leans against the salt shaker, the edges curled slightly. He traces the frame with his thumb. You'd tell me not to make it about anger. You'd tell me to stand, but not shout. The clock ticks. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower hums, the sound faint, detached from the stillness in the room. The door creaks. His daughter steps in, holding her school bag by the straps. Dad, Mrs. Harmon said she's proud of me for today. He meets her eyes. She should be. They sit in silence. She looks at the photo. Do you think Mom saw? He swallows. I think she's the reason you walked through that parking lot the way you did. Her small hand slides over his. I didn't cry, not in front of them. That's not weakness, he says softly. That's knowing when to hold your ground. Her eyes flick back to the photo. Was it hard for you back then? Marcus takes a breath. Every day. But I learned, the louder they wanted me to be, the quieter I became. That's how you make them listen longer. The girl nods, absorbing words that will live in her longer than he'll ever know. Outside, a car passes, tires on gravel. The moment stretches fragile, weighty. He looks back at Lydia's frozen smile. We're still here, still standing, and it's not over. The girl rests her head on his shoulder. He doesn't move. The clock ticks on, steady as breath. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world keeps turning, bending, not fast, not loud, but bending all the same.